Welcome to the Robcast with Rod Turner, the show all about real estate. We discuss everything that affects asset-backed businesses, investments, and go deep into the details with some of the best in the business.
John, we've recently had the Labour government budget, which was a big deal, wasn't it? One thing from property investors is they might be thinking, oh, actually, we came out all right when in the context of how everyone's feeling. What would you say to that?
I think there's definitely a feeling that we've dodged a bullet. When you look at the rumours that were out there pre-budget, and you don't know how much of that was just stoked up by the media and how much of that was sort of leaking of thoughts and ideas, seeing where they land by, the government, and then going, oh, that wasn't liked. We'll just, maybe put that one for later. But this was probably the second budget in 3 or 4 years where I've had people saying to me, I've got to sell because it's a racing certainty that capital gains tax is going to go up for property investors, and it hasn't. So I think probably other than the obvious with obviously stamp duty, property investors are feeling a little bit, well, that could have been a lot worse. We've got away reasonably unscathed and scot-free in our property business. And that's partly true. And I suppose that, you on one hand, you could see a bit of a positive for property investors where national living wage has gone up nearly 7%. So could start with affordability on rents,
So rent's going up, but unintended consequences.
I was just going to say, with that, and obviously we need Adam here, but obviously if that's the sort of baseline benchmark for wages, and if you want to then add on to that the employer NICs, national insurance contributions, those things are incredibly inflationary. Businesses have either got to turn around and cut the wage rises, and it's still a tight labour market out there, or they've got to pass on cost to the customer, either through the supply chain of businesses or direct to the consumer. So all in all, that's very inflationary. And I know, and so from if that's inflationary, then the path of interest rates and that period of time it takes for interest rates to come down. And as we know, and I know I'm going to let you crack on in a sec, whatever Bank of England base rate does, it's swaps and gilts that are the key thing for mortgage interest rates. If that's inflationary, that path downwards is much slower. That hurts us as property investors. And I know you did a big post the 0.25% drop in Bank of England.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm sure I bang on about this all the time, but it's this whole idea that the base rates lead mortgage product pricing, and it's just not the case anymore. It's done on swap rates, but also it's done in deposit-led banks as well. So there's a few different kind of avenues, and I said when the base rate went down, I put a post out saying, listen, don't get too excited, everyone, because you can expect mortgage products to go up on this news. Yeah. And literally that's what started to happen. It just took about 4 or 5 days, and you saw lenders starting to put pricing up. Because it was, right, what are they foreseeing? They're foreseeing not just the inflationary pressure that the budget, from all the reasons you've just said, but it's the type of inflation, which is cost push inflation, which actually lasts a lot longer than demand pull inflation, which is not what we've got here. So it is a bit concerning, but it's about looking at everything in context, isn't it? So where you said, look, the good things are, well, incomes have gone up. Yeah, certainly for the lower earning kind of percentile, they've shot up a bit, which is a fantastic thing. But then you look at the context of everything else and you think, well, that shot up, but what other staples of living have shot up for them? So where has their budget for housing actually shot up or not? And so then it's, okay, can they afford it? So who's going to lose out? Well, as a landlord, do I want that market in here? And then you start to think, right, what do I need to do as a property investor, and who's my target audience, and are they, like, as an investor, all you're thinking about with property is, are they going to look after the asset, and are they going to pay on time at market rent? Right. And so if that's the case, that they might struggle with those payments, then right, okay, now what do I need to do? Now my costs have gone up, not just on the finance side, but also on things like everything else.
Yeah.
And it's you think, well, now do I need to get rent guarantee insurance? And I know everyone said, oh, it's not worth it because the only people that you can get it for are other people. But actually, I think it is worth it now because the risk to someone's income has really, really gone up now. Whether it's, I don't know, splitting up with a couple who are lending there, whether it's losing a job because now that business can't afford to keep taking on staff. There's so many different concerns that have come out of that budget for me as a property business that I don't think have really been highlighted because they're not direct results. They're the unintended consequences that have come from it, I think, which are a little bit concerning for me. But look, is what it is, and the idea is to be adaptable to those things that you can't change, and that's the name of the game, isn't it? So
it is. I mean, I mean, if you looked at every rumour that came out pre-budget, you would come out going, no, it wasn't a bad budget, was it? Compared to what it sort of could have been.
Yeah.
And so many people were pumping stuff out there as fact before the event. And I did a long series of posts on exactly that because I got so fed up of hearing all these things that were going to be raised uncertainties in the budget. But I think it is the intended and unintended consequences, because I think there's a couple of things going on there from a Labour perspective, and sometimes I can't work out whether they're intended or unintended. Are they just incompetent on some things, or actually are they following an agenda that they truly understand to try and get a result? Because if you look at things like Section 24, people go, oh yeah, why would someone bring that in? That was just to drive a complete consequence, and
it's done what it set out to. So actually it was quite a good thing in terms of how efficient it was. It might have taken a little bit longer than they were expecting, but it's absolutely done what it meant to do. There are unintended consequences because the whole context of everything else, the whole institutional landlords coming in, all that it takes a long time.
Absolutely.
Far longer than they kind of were expecting. So there's been an issue with stock, but look, that's part and parcel of it. I mean, is there anything else in that budget that you think as property investors we need to kind of be aware of that maybe are not the obvious ones, like we talked about the stamp duty and the national insurance contributions?
No, I think obviously the big elephant in the room is what they did to pensions, really. And again, if I look at the clients I deal with, probably 50% of my, like 98% of my clients are property investors. Yeah. And they are either what I call forefront property investors, that's their main or only business, or they have a business that they then invest in property as their, asset building. And then if I look across that sort of that client base, probably 50% of people have what I'd call a pension of note, and a pension of note is generally, I would say it's sort of £250,000 plus. That might sound obscene, but that often starts to then make up a decent sum of their wealth, So, and I've obviously got clients who've got significantly more than that. So, you had people going to sleep, waking up Wednesday morning with £1 million house and £1 million pension, and they didn't have an inheritance tax issue between a couple, and they went to bed that night and they had a £400,000 potential inheritance tax issue all of a sudden. And that's quite a seismic change.
Well, it'll be more than that, won't it? Because the pension then comes down, and if anyone wants to draw that pension, then it works out. It's about 57%.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So it's pretty, as usual with these things, when you start playing around with pensions, the aim of a pension is a long-term savings vehicle for retirement. Now, okay, a lot of people can say, that's still gone off tack a little bit now, isn't it?
Well, that was traditionally what pensions. All these, I see these kind of conversations going on, and you get lots of financial kind of advisors going, "Oh, well, good, because now pensions should be used what they're meant to be for." But I don't think that's fair, because actually the reality of it is that pensions, that hasn't been what they've been kind of, I guess, promoted on in the last 10 to 20 years probably, which has been a whole thing of this sits outside your estate. Yeah. And so people have gone, right, I'm going to act on that. And the idea has been, yes, we want to encourage saving and we want to put that in. And then the whole idea with businesses and employers, matching contributions and all that stuff. It's been because people have worked and done things within the rule book and within the guidance it's for. never once has anyone during that time gone, well, this is just for retirement. But it's all been, well, this sits outside of your estate. Therefore, you're better off putting some of those extra bits in there rather than, I don't know, somewhere else. And I think that's the difficult thing, I guess, for people to grasp now is, where should I put money?
Yeah.
Is your pension still the useful tool that it was in terms of tax efficiency? Because before the budget, pensions were great because you get the tax coming off as you put it in, rather than an ISA where you've got to pay that tax putting in. But people often forget, for some reason, that you still get taxed when you draw money out of a pension, whereas the ISA, you don't get taxed. And so what I tended to think was, well, what do you prioritise, the ISA or the pension? And that kind of depends on your tax bracket at the time. So if you're a 20% taxpayer, you might prioritise your ISA. Whereas if you're a 40%, and people might think, well, yeah, you've got a limit on your ISA and things like that. But there's lots of reasons why property investors might do that. They might have big directors' loans that they're taking kind of money and using that as income, shall we say, in inverted commas. So they are still a 20% taxpayer, but they've got excess cash flow to them. What a great thing to put into your ISA. Yeah, but as soon as you start going over that threshold into the higher tax bracket, then, again, very general comment, but it was typical that actually your pension was good. The big issue I have now is, wouldn't it be great if we all knew when we were going to die or when we were going to need that money? Because then you can actually plan. Unfortunately, now you don't. So I'm going to be very wary of leaving excess money in my pension that I don't think I'm going to have to spend, because I'm going to be thinking, well, actually, that's 67% tax rate on my estate rather than 40, which it could be in my ISA. So it really does get you thinking, which I think is, again, a real unintended consequence of this government, because suddenly now there's not as much motivation for you to keep saving into that pension over a point. Then if you do live longer, suddenly haven't got that money there to pay for your retirement. So who does it fall on? Well, it falls on the government, doesn't it?
I mean,
or the taxpayer, I should say, really.
Pensions, have been an extraordinarily wonderful thing. They're still a wonderful thing in a lot of cases. However, you've really now got to look at circumstances quite heavily. So the tax relief on the way in has been fantastic. It's free money from the government. The tax-free growth whilst it's in the pension wrapper. Okay, so if you are selling an asset that's gained in value, obviously that's not taxed. If you're receiving income in to the pension from the asset that's in there, again, that's not taxed. So it's not subject to capital gains tax or income tax on any assets within the pension. And then you still got this. You still got the pension commencement lump sum, so the tax-free cash. Yeah, so you can still draw 25% of your pension as a lump sum out tax-free for now. For now, again, that was another case. So certainty that was going to have something done in the budget. Lots of people drew their tax-free cash. Or you can turn around and draw money from your pension, and if you haven't taken all your tax-free cash out, your first 25% that you draw is tax-free, and then the other 75% is added to your income, and you taxed at your marginal rate. So there are still some advantages of a pension, because you can get more money into the vehicle. You're not going to pay tax as the vehicle grows, and then there is still a bit of a tax benefit in taking the money out, but yes, you are going to be paying some tax then as you draw it. So, but when you also factored into that, it was outside of the estate. It was like a no-brainer to put money into pension. It's probably less of a no-brainer now. However, I still think it's a good thing, and I will go through a few sort of comparisons on pension and ISA. Obviously, one of the issues with pension is the way it's locked up and the sort of inaccessibility of it over a period of time. And at the moment it's age 55, it's going to go to age 57 in April 28, and obviously there's talk about going to 58 in 2034. and therefore it's open to so much change. And this is my issue with it. It's incredibly frustrating that you turn around and build a plan around your pension for then there to be major change over time, and someone's just kicked the chessboard up in the air and the pieces have gone everywhere. And that is immensely frustrating, I think, for most people.
Wouldn't it have been nice if they were said, well, we're going to make changes, but it's only going to affect now the people that will be retiring by the time they get to that point in time? But then obviously it doesn't really help the government with their tax take. But yeah, it is frustrating. Yes. So do you want to give some examples maybe of where? Because in my mind, I'm just thinking, well, I wouldn't want my pension to get over a certain amount, because I'm thinking, well, retirement, and again, it's in the context of all your wealth and assets, depending on where they are and what you're trying to do. But I kind of now, my initial thought, and this may be kind of wrong, is, I don't want to make that pension pot too big now, because then that falls apart on my estate, and actually the tax implications of that are far worse than other assets in my estate.
It is and it isn't, because just remember, so let's look at a pension and an ISA, at death. It's term. So, and again, let's work on the fact that you're either not married or you're the second couple to die. So it's going down to the next generation. A lot has been made, I suppose, of also under current tax legislation, if you die before age 75, your pension is income tax free to the beneficiaries, so they can draw it all out of the pension tax wrapper as one lump and not pay any income tax on it. They can turn around and take an income from it over time, and there's no income tax on it. And at the moment, this is bearing in mind that the change of bringing pensions back into the estate isn't going to happen until April 27, and they are obviously doing a consultation at the moment. The consultation is not on, is this a policy or not? It's, is there any finer detail that needs to be thought about? And there probably is. And this is potentially one of the issues where, are they going to start playing around with the whole age 75 piece? Who knows? I would have thought they'd have announced it, but who knows? So there is an advantage. So the last thing, we don't know our expiry date. It's not stamped on our arm. Okay, so we can't plan for that. And plainly, you almost don't want to be dying before the age of 75, preferably. So your pension is going to be taxed on your beneficiaries if post 75, but so's your ISA. All right. So now
but not as much.
Well, they're both going to be taxed at 40% from an IHT perspective.
But then
they're going to pass down to the beneficiary. So any assets that were in the ISA are now outside of an ISA wrapper in the beneficiary's hands. You could argue that there is still a benefit of having the pension, because an inherited pension, and again, this is probably something they're looking at, then is that individual's inherited pension. They can keep it in the pension wrapper. It grows tax-free, okay? Whereas the ISA has lost its ISA status in the hands of the beneficiary, and now it's just ordinarily taxable on capital gains.
But at least they have access to it.
Well, but then but as an inherited beneficiary pension, they have access. So it's open access to the beneficiary. But
then they're taxed.
But as you are, so yes, there's a pot there. Yes. Okay, what we're saying is there is a cash pot to draw from that is not taxable as you draw it. But if on that money, you'd be paying income tax and capital gains as it grows and adds in. This one here, it's got tax-free growth in gains and income, but as you draw it. So
if you want to use it now, ISA, if you don't, but then again, you don't know what. You don't know what age and time
kids are going to be doing. You don't know what. So it's really, it's tricky. I mean, planning has always been difficult because of this one thing that you've always said. It's all the imponderables, because we don't know. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't know what our family situation and circumstances are going to be. When that fateful day happens. So there is still this, potential issue. you could still pass money down the generation. You still could turn around and the pension comes down. As I say, it's still within that pension wrapper, so it's getting tax-free growth, and it's getting any income going into the pension from the assets that are generating it is tax-free. So there are still some big advantages there, but it's a much closer thing now. An ISA doesn't give you the tax relief on the way in like a pension does, but plainly it's fully tax-free on the way out, and the gains are fully tax-free. So it's a much more of a marginal call, and now I think it's even more important to try and understand what that overall asset mix is. It comes back to the asset mix. You can put more into your pension than you can your ISA. It's £20,000 annual ISA allowance. It's £60,000 on the pension side. But it is that much closer call. So I wouldn't rule either one in or either one out.
Yeah.
It's
They're both useful. Yeah, one you can get your hands on earlier, one later. But then there's different pros and cons to each. In terms of the ISA, we talked previously about kind of JISAs and junior pension, junior SIPs and the like, and the benefits of those. One thing I always find a bit funny is when people are doing that but not maxing out their own, and I just think sort your own like gas mask on before like they say on the flight, isn't it? And am I wrong there, or are there extra benefits for doing? If you're not maxing out your own kind of pension contributions or ISA, is there a benefit to doing your kids? I guess obviously if it's going to form part of your estate, they're taxed, whereas it's theirs. But I just kind of think earlier on,
no specific benefit, let's say. I mean, there is that whole you're sort of gifting some money early, so that's coming across. But no, I think it's a good analogy that you use with the fit your own gas mask for others. I think probably now it's become a tighter call of it was always feed your £60,000 into the pension and probably do it up a level as company contributions if you have that flexibility to do so. Because obviously one of the issues with pension contributions, it's always been linked to relevant earnings, and rental income and dividends aren't relevant earnings. So you saw it as a property investor, you often needed a limited company to really be able to take full advantage.
And especially if you're, like we talked about, when you're on a 20% taxpayer because you're living off a lot of directors' loans, then actually that affects it as well, doesn't it?
It is. So there. I mean, I'm sure the SaaS industry had a sharp suck of breath in when they turned around and brought them back into the estate, and I saw lots of stuff on the SaaS group. So don't worry, it's not included. The kids are already part of it. And, there was some very fundamental misunderstanding of how a pension works by a lot of people who put themselves out there as knowing what they're talking about.
Because, I mean, one of the things that came up was, it can't form part of your estate because it's a trust. And obviously, like, the government's I imagine putting things in place to ensure that, it will. And it might not be a case of, it forms part of the estate, but it's taxed as
absolutely.
At
the moment, as the papers that have been put out there is it's going to be the pension trustee's responsibility to pay the tax. Again, all that's going to do is make the probate process much more complicated and more dragged out. And the biggest issue, and this is the same as it is for someone personally, it's now suddenly also an issue within the pension, is liquidity. Again, if we think of people who are probably listening to this and the people that we know in our networks, we're all property investors together, and often people are putting commercial property in their pensions because they're preferring that often to equity and bond funds. Not always, but often. And if you can imagine having your £1 million SaaS with a £950,000 commercial property in it, and now you've got to turn around and find near £400,000 worth of inheritance tax to pay. I mean, that's you've got problems.
Yeah. And like we said about the interest rates now going into the IHT stuff as well, it's tricky.
So liquidity of your pension fund is going to be quite key, and that could be seen as a bit of a disadvantage of sitting there with loads of commercial property in your pension. So that's so again, I would say you could argue. I know that lots of SaaS people would not like me for saying so. The the IFAs will be, you know, I belong to a number of IFA groups, you know, and I get fed up with the number of, on Facebook and things, and I get fed up with the number of posts that get put on there. Oh my God, my client's looking at cashing in his £600,000 ISA and creating a property portfolio. What can I say to him to persuade him and why it's a bad idea? And I always post, is it a bad idea for him or for you? Because are you losing your fees, or, you know, it might be a great idea for you. So the IFAs are probably rubbing their hands thinking, well, you know, one of the advantages in a lot of ways of your Vanguard Life Strategy Fund is it's immediately liquid. That's assuming it hasn't dropped 25% in value within the previous, you know, year, 6 months, because you don't really want to sell on the down cycle. But ultimately, it just, you know, people have got to look at things now even more heavy. It was a slam dunk. Didn't really matter whether your pension was highly illiquid. It's not going to have to pay any tax. It's there to draw an income from, therefore generate income from it and hold assets. You know, that's great. All of a sudden, that doesn't necessarily look like the best strategy. So it's all change. And it now, whereas often the pension would be looked at separately by people, and there's lots of people out there who, you know, then, well, I'm only interested in look at what the pension's doing. It's a much more a holistic view is now required.
Definitely.
And you know, ISA's really at the £20,000 mark. Sort of coming back to the original question, you should be feeding your own £20,000 in. The reason probably people are going in and putting money in ISAs first off is to at least get that compounding effect for kids and grandkids. Early doors, really. Yeah. And there's a lot to be said for that, because that's part of the whole gifting pattern. But I probably think now you've got to put your £20,000 in first. Yeah. Probably even before, you know, again, everyone's different, so this is not advice on specific circumstances. But I'd say in a lot of cases now it's 20 grand ISA first, even before a pension contribution. Really. I know there's no income tax relief, but probably getting more flexibility. Depends on what age you are when you're making those sort of contributions. And are you over 55 who could draw now? A
lot more to think about, isn't there? Yeah,
huge amount. Which, you know, dare I say, I mean, it's great for me because it's just opened up more conversations with people. But you know, I'm a client of myself. You know, I set this business up because I was my perfect client, and it's causing me headaches of now. You know, I had a plan. That plan's changed, and that's why the process of ongoing planning is so important, because everyone just wants this. There's this well-known concept out there called the end of history illusion. The end of history illusion is I could sit here and talk to you and turn around and say, Rod, talk to me about the last 10 years. How have you changed as a person? How's your family setup changed? How has everybody involved in your family changed? How's your financial situation changed? You could tell me 10, 15, 20 things that have all happened in the last 10 years to you. Massive change. And I say, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And most people turn and go, not a lot. I'm going to stay as I am. And they think history ends today. And when you look forward, no massive change is going to happen to you. So people sort of do their planning and then they go, that's it. Because not a lot's going to change. They know that there'll be some macro factors that come in, but they don't really see that they will change as people, their family setup, financially, etc. Well, you know, in 10 years' time, we'll be able to look back and there'll be all that massive change. But they often don't continually plan. They just want the magic. Can I do that? Am I set up? Can I forget about it? The answer is no.
Brilliant stuff as always.